Hey everyone, what's up? Just a random video here, kind of recapping some stuff that I documented in 2016. And lately I've been documenting a whole lot of stuff about the Chicago Cubs being important to the symbolism that is going on throughout the mainstream media and also the sports leagues and whatnot. And if you're new to the channel, check out some links in the description. I'm going to talk about gematria, which is the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases, also signs and symbolism, and it stems back to Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, the belief that God created the world by merging the letter with the number. But there are people who understand this knowledge, and every day they're using it to manipulate the average person's mind, and they can control the world with using this system. So anyway, on June 14th or whatever, I didn't listen. Whatever, on June 13th, I didn't fully listen to it, I don't think. I can't remember. But June 14th, I documented how I was listening to the radio show called The Gematria Effect. And one of the callers, Ben Tetzlaff, had called in and talked about Bobby Fischer. And for whatever the reason, it just sparked something in my brain that I mentioned Bobby Fischer in 2016 when the Cubs won the World Series, or just before the Cubs won the World Series, because we had the death of a guy named Phil Chess, and he was the creator of Chess Records, who also created the first rock and roll album, Rocket 88, and Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88, and much, much more. And the Cubs broke the curse of the Billy Goat and whatnot. And anyway, Phil Chess died in Chicago, I documented. And on Wikipedia, it even said that there was a guy named Cub Coda who said Chess Records was the greatest American blues record company, right? Cub Coda. Once again, this record company is in Chicago, Chess Records, you know, Cub Coda. Come on. And earlier in that year, we had the death of Sean Rooks, right? A piece in chess and basketball. And his name in gematria equals 117. And he debuted in the NBA on 11/7, a lot like 117. And Bobby Fischer was born on January 17th, a lot like 117. And Bobby Fischer also born in Chicago. So I was like, synced up to the Cubs. And all I did was just re-look up some stuff now that I've learned reverse gematria and just a little bit more knowledgeable since 2016 in regards to all of it. And I noticed that Bobby Fischer equals 114. And this was the big number that I was talking about in regards to the Cubs winning the World Series that year. The Cubs, when they won Game 7, they got their 114th win of the season, and they were in their 114th season being called the Cubs. And there was a Hoboken train wreck, and that same day the Cubs tied Pittsburgh, and the word tie equals 114, and they said 114 people got injured on that train wreck, and Hoboken's where the first ever baseball game was supposedly played. That's why it was important. And the last time there was a tie in the major leagues was in 2005 when the White Sox won for the first time in 88 seasons. Remember, Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88. They had that connection to Chicago. Also, the team that tied was the Houston Astros. They tied the Cincinnati Reds 114 days before the World Series, and they made the World Series and lost to the White Sox. So there's a whole bunch of this 114. So interesting. Bobby Fischer equals 114. This year's the 114th World Series as well. So, I talked about a whole bunch of stuff. My uncle, who was a Cubs fan, dying on January 14th, just after the Cubs won the World Series. Anyway, notice Bobby Fischer, his birthday, March 9th. If you go from his birthday to the day that he died, it was 10 months and 8 days, a lot like 108. That was like the biggest number ever on the Chicago Cubs. They hadn't won a World Series in 108 years, and the Great Chicago Fire began on 10/8, October 8th, and the Willis Tower is 108 stories tall, and a baseball has 108 double stitches, and much, much more. Chicago Illinois equals 145 in gematria. Type it out here. Chicago, Illinois, 145. I think if you write out 145, it equals 108, right? So there was a lot of stuff that was synced up to much, much more of the 108, you know. Can't even remember it all, but lots of 108 going on that year. And then the Cubs broke the curse from 108 years. And now I see Bobby Fischer, born 10 months, died 10 months, 8 days after his birthday, and his name equaled 114. So he was absolutely connected. And then we got the death of Phil Chess. Think about Bobby Fischer, you know, a great American chess player and all that. Also, they talked about on the gematria effect how, and something I didn't know before, how Bobby Fischer called out the Jews, right? And think about that in regards to Kabbalah, and, you know, it's a Jewish practice, and whatever else. The Jews understand this system, but they're not the true Jews. They're the synagogue of Satan, right? The false Jews that rule in the end times. And what's interesting about all that is just that Bobby Fischer died at the age of 64. I don't know if I put it in here. He died at the age of 64, right? And synagogue of Satan equals 64, just like Israel equals 64. And it all has to do with Saturn and whatnot. And Thelema equals 64, and do what thou wilt equals 64 in gematria. And also his birthday being 3/9 or 9/3, the word Saturn equals 93. Israel has the legislative branch called Knesset that equals 93. So lots of interesting things. So just wanted to point all that out, that he died at the age of 64. He is Jewish too. That's what's even more messed up. He is Jewish, and then he calls out the Jews, you know, because that's the way they do it. They completely mind fuck people. You know, they have to have someone calling them out, because if they don't have someone calling them out, then people aren't, you know, it's just screwing with your mind. If people call them out, then they create anti-Semitism, and then people can't call it out anymore. You know what I mean? So, you know, he's just doing his role, calling out the Jews, just like Henry Ford. Henry Ford, same way, calls out the Jews. Probably doesn't even really hate the Jews. He's just playing his role and what he has to do in order to further along the manipulation. But also think about Israel in regards to World War, and this year being the 114th World Series, right? Israel created out of World War, and 104 World War equals 114, and Holocaust equals 114, and Pearl Harbor equals 114. It's an important number to World War. So we have these Israel connections. And in 2016, that was something I talked about because it was big with the number 48. Israel declared its independence in the year 48, and the Indians haven't won a World Series since the year 48. And Donald Trump had the biggest election upset after the Indians won the World Series, right? And it was the biggest election upset since the year 48. Donald Trump equals 48. The word wall equals 48. The Mexican-American War ended in the year 48. Pence later became the 48th vice president. Israel declared its independence on 14/5. Remember, Chicago, Illinois equals 145 of the year 48. Also, Cleveland equals 48 in gematria. And also in regards to this 14/5 date, Israel's independence was declared by a guy named David Ben-Gurion that equals 145. And they declared their independence 145 days before the World Series began in 1948 even. So super synced up to the Cubs and also the Indians. Also, you know, there was also the closest supermoon since the year 48, just after the World Series that year. And supposedly the Jews identify with the moon because the moon goes away to just a sliver, and then it always makes a comeback, right? Just like how the Jews are supposedly wiped out, and then they always come back, right? So also remember, this year Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So just how interesting, you know. Bobby Fischer won the world championship, upsetting the Soviets' domination, right? And Russia equals 48 in gematria. World War equals 48 in gematria, the reverse reduced. Kim Jong-un equals 48 in reverse reduced. So super important number. The word Freemason equals 48. And I believe it also equals 48 in Hebrew. So absolutely super significant. And it is still significant to this year. And you know, it's all just a chess game. Also, the reason I bring all that up about the Cubs and the Indians, and I noticed that in 2016, was because of this right here. On one of the commercial breaks, they showed this guy holding this sign up in the background, and it says "Back 1948," and then it has the Israel flag on it, and I didn't know what that meant, so I looked it up, and I found out Israel declared its independence in that year, in 1948. And this was what I was talking all about, the Indians not winning since the year 48, or last winning in the year 48, so it's ridiculous. Also, I pointed out, you know, chess is 8x8 board, Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88. Cubs were supposed to win because of Back to the Future, right, in 2015, the 88 miles per hour to go to time travel. Also, 88 is the reason, like one of the big reasons why I started learning about gematria. It's following numerology years ago, but I learned that neo-Nazis get the number like tattooed 88 on them, and I looked up why, and it said because H is the eighth letter. So HH, a lot like Heil Hitler, right? And I was like, huh. And I started just applying some things to my own life in regards to it, and I found a whole bunch of interesting stuff. And then later on, I found Zachary K. Hubbard, and he was showing how the news was being decoded, and you know how the news was using this system and whatnot. So just interesting in regards to this number, and you know all kinds of other stuff with it. We're in the 88th anniversary of the stock market crash right now, and think about it: Herbert Hoover, HH. And even one of the Nazi guys, Baldur von Sirach, who equals 88, and he died on A8. He was a leader who was influenced by Henry Ford, who wrote the International Jew. The International Jew equals 88, and Mein Kampf equals 88 in gematria, and it was abridged in English 8 years and 88 days after releasing in Germany. And Henry Ford died 8 months and 8 days after his birthday. What are the odds of all that, you know? And this Baldur von Sirach guy, he was even married to Hitler's official photographer, Heinrich Hoffmann, and he married his daughter, Henriette Hoffmann, HH, Heinrich Himmler, you know? Come on. Just think about all that. HH, what are the odds? And the reason I bring all that up is when you look up that guy who he said a lot of the Germans were influenced by Henry Ford, and he also mentioned how they looked up to Henry Ford, and they didn't look up to Herbert Hoover was the president at the time, right? Herbert Hoover, HH. He's also the guy who signed into Congress, Star Spangled Banner being the national anthem. That's why it's important to this year. You know, the Cubs played in the World Series just after World War I came to an end. And they also lost. The Curse of the Billy Goat happened in 1945, which was just after the end of World War II. So, I mean, I just honestly cannot see the Cubs not making the World Series this year. Just there's so many things lined up for the Cubs, but maybe for some odd reason it's something else I'm supposed to see because of the Cubs, and maybe it's for the Indians. You know, maybe it's the reverse of 2016 or something weird like that. But there's so much lined up for the Cubs this year because of World War and it being the 114th World Series. So, and the national anthem stuff syncs up to the Cubs. I mean, there's lots of stuff, a lot of the big themes. The Stoneman Douglas shooting, the Valentine's Day Massacre. The original one was in Chicago. Then this year we got the one in Miami, basically, where, you know, in the Back to the Future, the Cubs sweep Miami, right? And then Anthony Rizzo supposedly went to high school there, the Cubs player. So a lot of stuff. I also want to point out Henry Ford died 114 days before his birthday, and Ford Motor Company was also founded 1 month and 14 days after his birthday. 114 stuff. And we're currently right now in the 114th year of Ford Motor Company even, but it will be 115 before the World Series, but right now we are in the 114th one when I documented this. So I thought that was interesting. The World War equals that, Holocaust, Pearl Harbor equals 114. It's huge. Henry Ford even died on 4/7 of the year 47. And think about it, the Freemason compass is set at 47 degrees, right? And Ford Motor Company equals 211, the 47th prime, and then he dies on 4/7 of the year 47. And, the Freemasons believe in something called Euclid's 47th problem about making the perfect square, the foundation of the perfect square. The word foundation equals 47, authority 47, White House 47, president 47, government equals 47. The Freemason headquarters are at Washington, D.C. even. And think about Freemasons who created this country. Our nation's independence, 7/4, the reverse. George Washington, his birthday, 2/11, the 47th prime. Also the 42nd day of the year. The word Freemason also equals 42. So, just stupid. All by the numbers. We'll leave it at that. I just wanted to make a follow-up video from what I documented in 2016, because there was a chess theme that was going on, and then Phil Chess of Chess Records from Chicago dies just before the World Series and whatnot, and then Cub Coda says that they're the best record company ever. And, they were famous for the Rocket 88, Curse the Billy Goat 88, so it's still synced up to this year because it's the 114th World Series. The Cubs were in the World Series after the end of World War II and after the end of World War I. So we'll leave it at that. Have a good one. Peace. So I forgot a few things in regards to World War that I wanted to put in this video. And also I discovered a few more things that I documented about chess. So I'm going to add it in here. So in 2016, on the day of Game 7, I had talked about how there was the shooting in Des Moines, Iowa. And think about the Iowa Cubs and whatever else. But on the same day that the Cubs won the World Series against the Cleveland Indians, there was a shooting really close to where I used to live in Des Moines, Iowa. And literally right across the street from where I worked was the 1908 Drought House. And I worked at Burger King that equals 112. It was the 112th World Series. The date was 11/2. And the Cubs hadn't won since 1908. They had a drought. And remember, they went to extra innings and it started raining. And then the Cubs won. It ended the drought, right? How crazy. And anyway, what happened, these two cops, though, they both got shot really close to where I live. One was on Aurora Avenue, but the other one was on Merle Hay Road. And they were both really close to the Merle Hay Mall. And when you look up Merle Hay, the guy who the street is named after, you find out that he was the first Iowa serviceman and perhaps the first American serviceman to die in World War I. Right? So what are the odds? It's connected to World War yet again. And just unbelievable. I worked right across the street from the 1908 Drought House or Drought Bar or whatever. And anyway, I was looking through my stuff. I typed in chess, and I guess on Game 6 of the World Series, and I don't even remember you've documented this, but Game 6 of the World Series, in the pregame they talked about chess and how baseball is a game of chess. I'm going to play the video for you really quick.
Objective. path to victory complex. Strategy put to the test. Maneuvers contested. Each move setting up the next until one is victorious. Chicago refused to be a pawn in Game 5, deftly moving around the board to avoid elimination. But their piece is set. Cleveland looks to capture a World Series title for the first time since 1948. The Cubs hope to avoid checkmate, while the Indians look to be crowned king. Who will make the right moves tonight?
So what are the odds? They do a whole chess thing before Game 6. And what I documented in this post was that there was all kinds of stuff about 11. The game was on 11/1, right? 11/1. And they kept showing this commercial about USA versus Mexico in soccer, November 11th, 11/11. And even more, there was a point in the game in the 9th inning, and I wrote, Baez makes a double play. They replay it at this angle, and they show the clock at 11/11. And number 11 for the Indians is running to second base. And then Baez, who made the double play, was number 9, 9/11. And if you've watched some of my previous stuff, I talked about how this World Series, there's something really connected to World War and also 9/11. There's been lots of 9/11 and World War symbolism. And look at that. The clock said 11/11. Remember, World War I came to an end on 11/11 at 11 even. So, craziness. So I just wanted to add that in here. In the game where they brought up chess, they did a bunch of 11/11 things. 11/11 here. And then they kept showing this commercial of 11/11, and the game was on 11/1. So really weird. So, oh yeah, and also the tie that the Cubs tied on the same day as the Hoboken train wreck, right? And tie equaled 114, and that was supposedly 140 people injured. The game was tied 1-1, a lot like 11. I even mentioned that when I paused it, the pause symbol up here, it looks like an 11 even. I was like, what are the odds that I pause it, I'm talking about all these 11s, and then 11/11 at 11, the pause symbol looks like, the World Trade Center. So I guess that's all I wanted to say. Just leave it at that. Wanted to show a little bit more of the World War coding because it's really synced up to the Cubs. I don't know. I don't know what that all means because we're not ending a new World War right now. But it seems like there's all this stuff connected to the end of World War and also to 9/11 and to the Cubs. So possibly they're going to be in the World Series before the beginning of the next World War. I don't know. I'm not trying to, I don't know. I don't know for sure. But we'll see what happens. Have a good one. Peace.